as though 'twere only to be found again at the day of judgment. He is the tithe pig of the family, which the gallows, instead of the parson, claims as its due. He has reason enough to be bold in his undertakings, for, though all the world threaten him, he stands in fear of but one man in it, and that's the hangman. And with him, too, he is generally in fee. However, I cannot confirm he's so valiant that he dares to look at any man in the face, for in that point he is now and then a little modest. Newgate may be said to be his country house, where he frequently lives so many months in the year, and he is not so much concerned to be carried thither for a small matter, if 'twere only for the benefit of renewing his acquaintance there. He holds a petty larceny as light as a nun does auricular confession, though the priest has a more compassionate character than the hangman. Every man in this community is esteemed according to his particular quality, of which there are several degrees, though it is contrary often to public government. For here a man shall be valued purely for his merit, and rise by it too, though it be put to a halter, in which there is a great deal of glory in dying like a hero, and making a decent figure in the cart to the last two staves of the 51st Psalm. This, we repeat, is the plain statement of a practical man, and again we throw out the hint for adoption. All we regret is, that we are now degenerated from the grand Tobyman to the cracksman and the sneak, about whom there are no redeeming features. How much lower the next generation of thieves will dive it boots not to conjecture. Itas parentum pejor avis tulit, nos nequiores mox daturos, progeniem vitiosiorem. Cervantes laughed Spain's chivalry away, sang Byron, and if Gay did not extinguish the failing flame of our knight errantry, unlike the robbers of Schiller, which is said to have inflamed the Saxon youth with an irrepressible mania for brigandage, the Beggar's Opera helped not to fan the dying fire. That laugh was fatal, as laughs generally are. Macheath gave the highwayman his coup de grace. The last of this race, for we must persist in maintaining that he was the last, Turpin, like the setting sun, threw up some parting rays of glory, and tinged the far highways with a lustre that may yet be traced like a cloud of dust raised by his horse's retreating heels. Unequalled in the command of his steed, the most singular feat that the whole race of the annals of horsemanship has yet to record, and of which we may have more to say hereafter, was achieved by him. So perfect was his jockeyship, so clever his management of the animal he mounted, so intimately acquainted was he with every crossroad in the neighborhood of the metropolis, a book of which he constructed and carried constantly about his person, as well as with many other parts of England, particularly the counties of Chester, York, and Lancaster, that he outstripped every pursuer, and baffled all attempts at capture. His reckless daring, his restless rapidity, for so suddenly did he change his ground and renew his attacks in other quarters that he seemed to be endowed with ubiquity, his bravery, his resolution, and above all, his generosity, won for him a high reputation amongst his compatriots, and even elicited applauses from those upon whom he levied his contributions. Beyond dispute, he ruled as master of the road. His hands were, as yet, unstained with blood. He was ever prompt to check the disposition to outrage, and to prevent, as much as lay in his power, the commission of violence by his associates. Of late, since he had possessed himself of his favourite mare, Black Bess, his robberies had been perpetrated with a suddenness of succession, and at distances so apparently impracticable, that the idea of all having been executed by one man was rejected as an impossibility. And the only way of reconciling the description of the horse and rider, which tallied in each instance, was the supposition that these attacks were performed by confederates, similarly mounted and similarly accoutred. There was, in all this, as much of the famous sacra fames as of the ori, of the hungering after distinction as well as of the appetite of gain. Enamored of his vocation, Turpin delighted to hear himself designated as the flying highwayman, and it was with rapturous triumph that he found his single-handed feats attributed to a band of marauders. But this state of things could not long endure. His secret was blown. The vigilance of the police was aroused, he was tracked to his haunts, and, after a number of hairbreadth escapes, which he only effected by miracle, or by the aid of his wonder-working mare, he reluctantly quitted the heathy hills of Bagshot, the pampas plains of Hounslow, over which, like an archetype of the galloping Sir Francis Head, he had so often scoured, the gorsy commons of Highgate, Hampstead, and Finchley, the marshy fields of Battersea, almost all of which he had been known to visit in a single night, and leaving these beaten tracks to the occupation of younger and less practised hands, he bequeathed to them, at the same time, his own reversionary interest in the gibbets thereupon erected, and betook himself to the country. After a journey of more or less success, our adventurer found himself at Rookwood, whither he had been invited after a grand field day by its hospitable and by no means inquisitive owner. Breach of faith and good fellowship formed no part of Turpin's character. He had his lights as well as his shades, and as long as Sir Piers lived, his purse and coffers would have been free from molestation, except, so far, Dick said, as a cog or two of dice went. My dice, you know, are lungs for odd and even, a bale of barred sink juices, a pattern of which he always carried with him. Beyond this, excepting a take-in at a steeplechase, Rookwood Church being the mark, a do at a leap, or some such trifle, to which the most scrupulous could not raise an objection, Dick was all fair and above board. But when poor Sir Piers had put on his wooden surtout, to use Dick's own expressive metaphor, his conscientious scruples evaporated into thin air. Lady Rookwood was nothing to him. There was excellent booty to be appropriated. The wise convey it call. He began to look about for hands, and having accidentally encountered his old comrades, Rust and Wilder, they were let into the business, which was imperfectly accomplished in the manner heretofore described. To return from this digression. When Turpin presented himself at the threshold of the door, on his way to inquire after his mare, to his astonishment he found it closely invested. A cheering shout from the tawny throng, succeeded by a general clapping of hands, and attended by a buzzing susurration of applause, such as welcomes the entrance of a popular actor upon the stage, greeted the appearance of the highwayman. At the first sight of the crowd he was a little startled, and involuntarily sought for his pistols. But the demonstrations of admiration were too unequivocal to be for a moment mistaken. His hand was drawn from his pocket to raise his hat from his brow. Thunders of applause. Turpin's external man, we have before said, was singularly prepossessing. It was especially so in the eyes of the sex. Fair we certainly cannot say upon the present occasion, amongst whom not a single dissentient voice was to be heard. All concurred in thinking him a fine fellow, could plainly read his high courage in his bearing, his good breeding in his debonair deportment, and his manly beauty in his extravagant red whiskers. Dick saw the effect that he produced. He was at home in a moment. Your true highwayman has ever a passion for effect. This does not desert him at the gallows. It rises superior to death itself, and has been known to influence the manner of his dangling from the gibbet. To hear someone cry, "There goes a proper handsome man," saith our previously quoted authority, Jack Hall, somewhat ameliorates the terrible thoughts of the meagre tyrant Death, and to go in a dirty shirt were enough to save the hangman a labour, and make a man die with grief and shame at being in that deplorable condition. With gracious smile of condescension, like a popular orator, with a look of blarney like that of O'Connell, and of assurance like that of Hume, he surveyed the male portion of the spectators, tipped a knowing wink at the prettiest brunettes he could select, and finally cut a sort of fling with his well-booted legs, that brought down another appeal of rapturous applause. "A rank scamp!" cried the upright man, and this exclamation, however equivocal it may sound, was intended on his part to be highly complimentary. "I believe ye," returned the ruffler, stroking his chin. "One may see he's no half swell by the care with which he cultivates the best gifts of nature, his whiskers. He's a rank nib." "Togged out to the ruffian, no doubt,"